Guys, welcome to TBD podcast, otherwise known as Installing in Progress.
It's our inaugural
We're
podcast.
in our inaugural fully functional actual podcast,
No
or
immersion
at least we're
breaks.
installing a podcast into the show.
It's still in progress.
It's still in progress,
Our
yeah.
yearly annual.
Our semi-annual,
Bi-quarterly.
bi-quarterly.
Quintennial podcast.
We
Put
got
it in your time capsule and dig it up in 50 years.
You expect this to go up every Wednesday afternoon, maybe.
I guess.
I want to say every Wednesday, just because that's the time frame for these things.
We'll throw a dart at the
Yeah.
calendar.
And then on mic one, you guys, we have our very, very, very illustrious John.
Hello, I'm large and in charge of
Nice.
Mic 1.
And on mic two, we got the dude, the one, the only, the Mark.
Yo,
He says, "Stupid."
The stupid.
That's the catchphrase.
That is
you
the
all come to
catchphrase.
know and hopefully love. Otherwise, it's going to be awkward.
And on mic three, we have the autiste, Anthony. The artiste, formerly known as Anthony. That's the one I wanted to
No,
say.
that is correct. I have forsaken my humanity. I've become an autiste.
You could say, this is who you are.
I drew a drawing earlier. It was not very good. So
It wasn't bad.
And here on mic four, we got yours truly, Seuss.
he does things.
I am the best dude. No, I'm just kidding. We're all the best dudes here.
He's
We're
a
all-
best dude.
We're all equally good.
And all of you are our other dudes. You know, maybe we'll have you on the podcast one day. We'll have a chat. We'll do it live.
All of you,
All of you.
Every single one
one
at
of you.
once.
All three of you.
especially you, Jeff.
I love you, Jeff.
We're coming for you, Jeff.
And maybe in the future we'll actually have Tommy on the podcast. We'll see.
yeah.
It depends.
If he ever grows his voice box back.
If he ever gets out of the surgery.
he's got to work on having feet. You know, it's a thing.
Oh man.
But yes, so we brought this podcast together really just to talk about things we're interested in, things we find interesting or passionate about, stuff like that, so we can share it with you guys.
More long form, serious style of discussion rather than just the batshit type of stuff we usually do.
Yeah, when we sometimes have immersion breaks while playing a game, or our casual side of podcasting.
we can be serious and we can prove it to you. Here, watch, no joke.
Easy.
Yeah.
Easy as fuck.
Boom.
dude. No characters.
I hope it didn't
involved.
pick up that ambulance.
It will.
don't
Oh,
worry.
by the way, guys, if for those of you that don't know our current location, it's in the middle of Lower Nob Hill, San Francisco. So and that means there is a hospital around here. So there is a lot of ambulances
That's true.
And
and
fire
fire
trucks.
trucks
And
running
fire
by.
trucks.
Usually
There's a
in
fire
tandem.
station like
So
2 blocks
so
down.
if you guys
yeah,
watch
there
the
is.
if you guys watch the episodes, I know for a fact in one of the Death Stranding ones, I actually animated a sequence. It was the first one.
I think it was.
Where everything is on fire, and yeah, that's
That wasn't
because
Foley. That was the actual ambulance.
yeah, that was an actual
fire truck.
ambulance. So we apologize if you guys hear any of that stuff.
Yeah,
Hopefully, with how we set up the mics, it should be fine.
Yeah, a little behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sure
Anyway.
it's not gonna last too long though.
yeah.
Oh
Eh,
no.
yeah, no, it's always like a quick zoom around. This street seldom sees fires.
Well, remember last year?
Oh God.
Or that? No, that was 2 years ago.
That's probably 2
That
years
was
ago.
before you and Mark and Anthony, or Mark Anthony as I call them, before they were here. The apartment across from us caught on fire horrifically.
Yeah.
It was really bad.
I think I
Oh
saw
yeah,
the news
it
on
was because somebody like
Left their
burnt
stove on or
left their
something.
stove on and burnt something on the
The
fifth
t-
floor.
Yeah, so like everyone in the building was like out in the street, like
Oh
just
man.
waiting.
Our roommate, you guys know him, Manny. He's not joining us today because I think he's at work. He, out of all people and of all things to do, he went outside, took his high definition Canon camera, and started taking pictures of the whole incident.
Yeah, amongst all the misery and the sorrow of everyone who may or may not lose their home, he's just snapping photos.
He's just he was in the moment though. He was like leaning and shit. It was
could you
funny.
He had
Imagine.
those
He
bad
was-
angles
He
on
was
deck.
our what's his name from DC that got killed off in BBS super fast. Jimmy Olsen.
He was
He's
her
our
Jimmy Olsen.
Olsen.
He's our Jimmy Olsen, and yeah. No, so anyway, let's get to these actual topics that that John spent all day working on, so that we could read it
Yeah.
and then ignore for the first 5 minutes of the podcast.
I mean,
Hey,
yes.
it's all right. We gotta have a slow inch into it. You know.
This is
Yeah.
this is the appetizer. Now we're on to the first
main
course.
course.
The second appetizer.
And then this comes to like to light of a serious problem that we basically 3 out of the 4 of us are game design majors, or at least
What?
aspire, at least like have delved into game design in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And
I would say you're probably a game designer.
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I did do some animation for games, and I do a lot of concept stuff, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, you at least have experience.
Yeah,
in
we're
it.
all
True,
knowledgeable,
true.
I guess.
Yeah.
We
And-
could say.
Yeah, no, and then one of the things that a lot of people that aren't necessarily involved in game design, they're more like in the production side of it.
Mhm.
And by production, I don't mean like they're preparing it inch by inch. They're more like, we want this to get done,
Yeah.
and we want this to succeed. Kind of like
Financially. yeah.
financially. They don't really understand what all that means.
Yeah.
From what we've seen, there's a couple articles online right now that are just basically warning big publishers and producers that and not necessarily the people working on the games, but the people telling people to work on games that they should really chill.
Yeah, the producers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that like success is not an instant thing.
Yeah. The thing about producers is they're always numbers, and it's because most of them are older and they don't play video games. They don't understand what they are.
A
Really?
lot
A
of
lot-
them.
There you go. And
Oh.
perspective wise, a lot of it was like trying to chase instant classics.
Oh
but
yeah.
a lot of games that become big have you. I get it. You're supposed to get instant gratification, but a lot of games make money way later than release dates.
Yeah.
Just a
Unless
slow burn.
unless it's a tried and true franchise.
Right.
Yeah.
Something
Yes.
like Grand Theft Auto. I mean, like for a hot minute, it was one of the highest selling games
Oh yeah. it
of the
sold.
last decade.
It sold a hell of a
still
lot.
one of the most played games after
Yeah.
like or look at a game like Skyrim. It's still relevant. Like
Yeah, how long has it been?
Almost 10 years.
How long has it been
How
since
many did-
GTA came out? Like
No.
2000.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a while, and people
14?
people are still
Oh, yeah.
playing them
GTA 5
GTA
came
5
out
RPG
2014,
servers,
right?
man.
Around 2014.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's been 6 years and it's still pulling good
And
money.
the gap
But
from-
that's because it's sitting also on the back of like 4 successful other GTA titles.
And it happens to be the only one that has online.
Yes.
September 17th, 2013. It's been out for
2013.
almost 7
Wow.
years.
Wow.
That is that. Wow. Huh.
So like I said, it just goes to show you it's one of those things where I mean,
Look at something like Melee. It's been around for almost what?
Yeah.
Almost 20 years at this point.
Skyrim will be 10 years old. Next
well,
year.
like even something like well,
Jesus.
I mean, let's go back to the whole Melee thing. Melee is actually sitting on the back of all the franchises that are into
Every
it.
franchise you
Yeah.
could say.
So it's like it probably like the one franchise that I would say that kind of like made itself an instant classic was
Yeah.
um
The Smash series in general. The Smash series is like a fever dream, I swear.
yeah.
But that going to say a lot of producers see that and they're like, well, we can make our game like that. Either just A, follow this formula, or B, they view games in the game industry very similarly to the movie industry.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's that whole capturing lightning in a bottle type situation where everybody thinks they can do it.
They're trying to force it, rather. I feel.
Yeah.
It's very strange. It's one of those things where it's like that's where you get things like PlayStation Battle Royale. where it's a half
Yeah.
cooked game that seems to have potential, but they've brushed it out the door. There's a
Right.
lot of games like
Or
that.
then you'll get games very like Dante's Inferno, where they're trying to capture the essence of a say God of War. But
Oh, yeah,
it's
you
not
get, like-
terrible, but it's not. What was and there was, remember that? I believe it was was it Castlevania?
I was
where
gonna
they
say
made
Castlevania
yeah,
or Shadow of War. I think it was called. I cannot remember.
I don't remember what the
There's
name was.
two.
But it was
There's two of them that are just straight up
God of War.
God of War.
Chain
yes.
weapon and everything.
Yes.
It's not to say that those games are bad games because they were playable, they were interesting,
Yeah, and
but
I
they
would-
weren't as successful as the game they're trying to emulate
But
because
because they missed the point. That's one of the things when people try to imitate other game styles, they tend to miss the point of the game style. That's why a lot of people who say try to replicate Resident Evil, including Resident Evil itself, at a lot of points, actually miss the point of Resident Evil later down the line.
Well, because
Yeah.
like I feel like just a side tangent for Resident Evil specifically. I feel like the company itself didn't want to continue doing the same thing,
Yeah,
so they try to quote reinvent the wheel on that one.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I mean and then they realized they really didn't have to, and then they went to a back to truer form with the Resident Evil 7, which honestly great
yeah.
game.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I mean, I'm talking more like because when Resident Evil 4 came out, I still love Resident Evil 4. It's a very different game from the classics.
Oh yeah.
But then they tried to imitate that.
Try to-
Well,
they,
not really imitate. They just
Yes.
took the camera angle.
They try to expand on it by forgetting more of the original series.
it was weird because the reason that 4 was good was its level design and its
Pacing.
its pacing and its controls. Because it was very I guess it was quick, really fast paced, but it was never like
well, because
overwhelming.
it let you take more control of yourself.
Yeah, and,
And that was one of the things that if I remember correctly, they really wanted to do.
yeah, but
Specifically because it was more dynamic that way.
yes, it was more dynamic. I actually liked that a lot. One of the things that was really disorienting about Remake 2 is the fact that you can't shoot someone in the head and then Falcon kick them away. But then when it comes to 5, they get to 5 and they decided it would be a good idea to increase the enemy health tenfold. And that makes the
And-
pacing terrible.
Mm-hmm. And then back on the whole topic of like instant
gratification.
well, not just gratification, but like instant classics.
Oh, yes.
I think not many games in the last decade can claim to have that status more than Undertale.
Undertale, like
Because Undertale within the span of the year it was released, it
It garnered a lot of praise. yes.
praise, attention,
Like-
and it was one of the highest selling games of that year.
that's
Eh.
fine.
Uh,
Enough to me, like a AAA title that became an instant classic is probably Batman for
yeah,
and
I can see
the
that.
Arkham series,
But
because like that, it wasn't really new. It just refined.
Yeah, and then that's the thing too, because like it refined a formula that specific area of time was trying to like really perfect,
but-
which was like the whole like open world climbing everything sandboxy game.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's another thing to talk about. The entire the entire like industry problem of this one thing did it really well. Everyone else tries to do it and it oversaturates the market.
Mhm.
Yo, I got a good one.
Oh.
Assassin's Creed.
yeah,
10,
yeah.
10 decade old franchise. There was a point when Assassin's Creed was coming out every year with the game.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Every single year, and Assassin's Creed was just before you even finish one, they would announce a new Assassin's
It was,
Creed.
it was
And
the
oversaturating the market.
That was after 3 and or it was 3 onwards, right?
It
It
doesn't.
it was 2 onwards,
2
because
onwards, yeah.
2 had 2 revelations, and what was the second one? So-
Oh my god! Yes, old Ezio.
Yeah,
Old Ezio game.
well,
Yeah.
that's Revelations. The other one.
And then there was.
Well, the
yeah.
point was that after the second one came out, 2 other ones came out, and then 3, and then 4.
Yeah.
So it's
they-
just kind of like quick succession because they were like, this
Oh.
formula works. Let's just
This
polish it
game
up a little
makes
bit
money.
more. Yeah.
Well,
keep
let's just
going
keep.
with
We,
it.
we need
Mhm.
a yearly release, or else we'll shut
And-
it
Which
down.
is in
kinda
turn
thing.
goes back to
And-
producers who think there's like, we know what the gamers want. We want them to do this, and it's good.
Yeah.
But
And-
they
and-
actually started listening to player feedback.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we're
Well-
kind of bored with Assassin's Creed. We don't really like what you're doing anymore. It's all repetitive with just a different skin on it. You're just adding slightly new things.
And making it play worse
Yeah.
because it's glitchy.
Because
Yeah.
it's not finished.
Yeah, exactly. It's like then they just release DLC over and over. I think the last one that did the yearly was Syndicate.
Yeah.
Syndicate was the last one of the
Yeah, because it was right after Unity, right?
Yep. And
Yeah.
then they took their year off. They made their movie. Nah, won't talk. We'll talk about the movie another time. Then they took a year off, and then they came out with Origins,
Mhm.
which reinvented the wheel for Assassin's Creed.
And I feel like producers nowadays are they're finally starting to get it. It could be the fact that producers are more young and probably know what video games are these days, and there's the old people are starting to
Yeah.
either stop or get a little bit more knowledgeable.
Well, maybe it's all the whole that the fans are finally like
Enough.
collecting themselves.
The future is now.
Because it's
man.
before it was just ranting and saying like, "Oh, this game sucks."
Now
Whereas
it's
now
like-
it's there's a
Constructive
lot
criticism.
exactly. There's a
A
lot
lot
more
more
of
actual
like
criticism,
actual
yeah.
thoughts putting into paper, or in this case on the internet.
And then also, it's also they're seeing us less as just consumers and more as like, well, we are your audience.
We
We're
are-
not just consumers. We're
There you go. And
audience.
that's
will
and that, and
not
that,
pay
and
for
that's
something
and
that
that's
we
the
don't
key
like.
word. We're not
Exactly.
out here buying toilet paper and like mattresses.
Yeah.
We're buying something that is done to not entertain us.
You can't just slap a new skin on something. You can't just new Coke this. You
Mhm.
can't just make it.
You can't just make it Coke Zero and then pretend that Coke sugar free is not the same thing.
Think about Coke original.
Well, it's
Double diet Dr. Coke.
it's it's really
Double
nice
diet
to
Dr.
see.
Mario. It's like,
Like-
here's Super Mario. We heard your cry. Here's Super Mario. It's like, what the
And yeah, no,
hell?
and it's funny enough. I think the Mario franchise did that for a hot second with all the new Super Mario games.
Well, they were doing
Kinda.
that. The thing is, with the new Super Mario Brothers games, they're like a side thing because they're really easy to produce.
Well, yeah, and I think
Uh,
that they were just doing it to have like Super Mario in a new console.
relevant.
That
Keep
and
Mario
they are the
relevant.
best
As
selling
weirdly
Mario
as it
games.
says,
Just only
keep
we
Mario
get-
relevant.
Mario, well, keep Mario relevant so that we can make stuff like Mario Odyssey.
Yeah, see,
Mhm.
that's something I can agree with. When they have an easy formula that is sort of their side thing, and it's like, okay, this is sort of a spin-off, and it works. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of the new Super Mario's,
Mhm.
but they are the best-selling Mario games by far.
And
Mhm.
honestly, they're really fun. It's one of those things where like
Yeah, it started off
um,
with Galaxy.
back in late high school, I used to have like a lot of episodes of Insomnia, and so what I would do is I would just beat the entirety of New Super Mario Bros. On Wii, and call it a day.
Yeah, yeah.
because you just could, and it's just,
What, beating the DS Mario?
oh, that one was fun too.
Oh,
Oh,
Now,
that
honestly,
one had
that-
co-op.
that's the best one.
So,
Not
well, not
64
co-op,
re-released? I think that was 3DS, right?
Yeah,
2DS.
3DS.
3DS. Just
3DS.
the original
3DS.
DS. For the Super Mario 64?
Yeah, that was 3DS,
Nope.
right? Oh no,
Yeah.
that's right. It was DS.
It's DS.
That's
It
called.
had-
They call it Super Mario DS.
Yeah, it was just Super Mario 64 DS, and
Yeah.
it had 4 characters in it.
Yeah, Yoshi
started
was
out
in
as
it.
Yoshi. It was really weird.
Yeah.
we touched on Nintendo, even like and then the Sony and even Microsoft, but kind of. But out of the 3 studios, which one would you say listen to the fans the best in terms of like producers, not just shelling out content to make money, but content that they know that they will keep their
Like-
audience interested?
Like, are you talking about the big companies or the actual like game
Devs.
developers?
Well, it's kind of an umbrella of the companies that are like the developers making it for the console exclusives. So
there-
like you
there's
have
not
your
there's not as many console
So
exclusives.
like
other
we're
than
talking
Nintendo
like
these days,
so
though.
are you talking like Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, or are you
Mhm.
talking about Ubisoft, EA,
Capcom.
Activision, Capcom?
for right now,
Konami.
I was mainly interested in
Big 3
big
consoles?
three.
Because
Big
Sony,
three?
It's big three.
Nintendo,
I'd say
Um,
Nintendo.
then-
and Xbox.
It would be more Sony. Sony, and I'll tell you why. Because like Nintendo, they know what they know what they want. They know what they want to make, and they're very much about like their whole design philosophy is the whole
Make fun games
make fun games fun.
Make fun games first, and then add all. The
Exactly,
Mhm.
but like they're never really like, oh, fans are saying this, so we're gonna do it like this. It's always like, no, we're making a game.
I think the only time that really happens is when it comes to Smash, when they're like people will cry out against something, and then
Well,
they'll be
yeah,
like,
I mean,
"Time to
because
patch that out."
yeah, because it was like, oh, well, it's breaking the community.
Yeah.
Whereas, let's say Breath of the Wild, like, I mean, nobody really had opinions about Breath of the Wild. It just came out.
It came out, and everyone was like, "Hey."
Twilight Princess probably is the closest thing that a Legend of Zelda franchise game had that
was a
actually
direct
affected.
yeah, it was a direct
the
result of
An
the
outcry.
previous. Game.
Yeah, because everybody wanted a more realistic, gritty Zelda.
Because after the whole demo, whichever one came over for
Mhm.
Wind Waker, I'm blanking right now.
The demo that came out for Wind Waker before it was Wind Waker was just Ocarina, Ganondorf, and Link fighting each other
Yep.
in a
Mhm.
CGI
And everyone
cutscene.
saw that and like, wow, we're
back
gonna
in
make a gritty
2003,
game.
right?
I
And then
believe
Wind
Space
Waker
World,
came
Space
out.
World,
Yes,
2003?
I think it was either 2002 or 2003.
Yeah,
But
And-
people were hyped.
exactly.
And then we got.
and then on the opposite side of the spectrum, you have Microsoft, who is specifically an agenda driven company. They might be changing that soon, though.
I think they've
from
been trying to get better, but
Exactly,
it's
but
a little bit too little, too late.
It's ingrained in their culture.
All of Microsoft's has been for me is like 3 games, and it's not just like the only titles. It's more like it's what's keeping them competitive, quote unquote.
Mhm.
So like
They're
Mhm.
exclusives.
the
I mean,
Halo, the
I do count Call of
Gears.
Duty because it was a standard to play that on tournament level.
Mhm.
There's Gears of War, and then there was Halo.
Yeah,
And to be fair, back in the days of like the 360 era, which that's like generation 6 or 7. But
Wii,
Wii,
original
PS3,
Wii, PS3,
and
360.
360. And during that time, the 360 dominated.
It
If you discount the Wii being a casual machine, the out of the PS3.
well, I mean, the best-selling console machine, casual
Yeah, I mean,
machine.
there's
Oh, yeah.
for 2 reasons. 2 reasons: the machine broke, or the online support, even if it was a subscription, was justifiable if you wanted to get "quote unquote" better at video games.
I think it comes down to the fact that it was easier to develop for than the PS3 was.
Mhm.
So a lot of the games were more stable, as well as the fact that it had a bigger install base of players. It had a larger library because of the Xbox Live Arcade being more lenient, and you could just sort of make things and plop them on there. And it didn't cost as much, I believe, as
No, it
PlayStation
did because I
3.
think the PlayStation 3 was still $100 more, or
Yeah.
close to $100 more.
And
But
the PS3 was more powerful.
No,
The-
and that's the thing, and that specifically, the Xbox 360's availability online
Mhm.
caused Microsoft to have online multiplayer specifically be its agenda.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
Which-
because of that, they shelved a lot of single player games, thinking that the transition was going to be exclusively to multiplayer. Which,
Yeah.
I mean, considering the top popular games for
Around-
the last decade have been multiplayer games, they were kind of right.
They were kind of right, but then
then
lately-
PlayStation reminded us all that that's not the case.
Well, lately there have been a lot of really great single player
even
games.
even
Yeah.
before we get into now, back in the PS3 360 era, PS3 360 era, where you said, like you were saying, Xbox is gearing more towards multiplayer, which is actually what turned me off from Xbox.
yeah,
I was
because
growing
that was
up.
the only thing you could do.
Exactly.
It's like you played
Makes
3
sense,
games.
yeah.
You
Like-
play,
Yeah, because like even if you
or
wanted to
even
say
then,
something
you
like,
played FIFA.
because like if I remember correctly, the was it still Xbox for the fighting game community, right? At that time.
Or
Street
was it
Fighter
still-
4, yes.
Yes, I
Yes.
believe so.
So it was specifically because the advent of online gaming could get you to play against other players,
yes,
regardless of lag or frame data loss or whatever.
Yeah.
I would
They
say
were in it.
Like, but yeah, like unlike you guys, like you guys were big in the multiplayer community. I was the opposite. I was
Well-
into story-based games. I was big on single-player games.
I,
So that's why I
that
got the
makes
game-
sense.
Hmm?
It makes sense. I did have a lot of single player games for my Xbox because for a long while we actually didn't have any internet connection because I was in the boonies.
Mhm.
But my single player games weren't like story based.
Mhm.
They were more like mechanic based
Mm.
games.
Hey.
So,
What
And-
was it back then for single player? For
I mean, you had the
360? It's
Fable
hard 'cause
games. We
Yeah.
had
Yeah, that was
Fables were cool.
we had Fable. we had I think Fable. We had Sonic Unleashed, that kind of thing. Sonic 06.
But the thing, those weren't exclusive.
no, they weren't. And that was really the thing. Any of the single player games that you did have, none of them were exclusives.
Mm.
The Xbox got the better versions of a lot of them, though.
Yeah, and that was the thing with PlayStation. They have a better consistency when listening to a fan base connected, like it used to charge.
There's a USB.
It wasn't charging it.
It might have gone unplugged.
Yeah, so just connect it over there. I mean, we're not using it right now.
But
Um,
yeah, I agree. PlayStation had a better library in terms of what it.
Well, 'cause, I mean,
wanted
it
for
still
its
ha-
player
it's- it
base
still
and
had
based on
mo-
its fans.
Yeah,
Um,
because the PlayStation still had multiplayer games. COD, not GTA.
they had shooters. That
they had
was,
racing games, they had
Was
shooters.
Saints Row no, it wasn't.
No, that was a
Um,
single player game.
There was another.
There was a
game.
bunch of multi-platform shooters that were on the PlayStation.
Yeah.
I felt like when it came to like multiplayer, they did more multi-platform stuff.
Oh,
But when it came for their own exclusives, from what I can think of,
yeah, they had mostly single player experiences such as like Infamous.
Yeah.
The Last of Us
The
was
Last
a big
of Us,
one.
God of War,
God of
Uncharted.
War, Uncharted.
That's the one I was gonna bring up. Yeah.
My personal favorite was like Heavenly Sword.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's not to say they didn't have their blunders like Heavy Rain.
That was more
Yeah,
just
but like
undercooked.
it was
but
it was things that they wanted to push, but ultimately when the fans would tell them like, hey, this isn't working, they would take it seriously, and
Okay.
they would try to develop more to what catered to not just a multiplayer driven fan base, but also those people that like those personal experiences. That's why arguably the Uncharted series gets better as it goes on.
Okay,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
found some. Twisted Metal.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, a lot of people forgot about that. Little Big Planet.
Oh, no,
Oh,
how did we-
that
how
was
did we
that
for-
was the
how
multiplayer
did we forget
juggernaut they
about
had.
that?
Killzone.
I can see why we forgot about the
Ratchet
Killzone.
and Clank. We said
I-
Infamous. Gran Turismo was the racing game. We couldn't
That-
think
Was
of.
that's what it
exclusive
was.
to PS4?
Yeah,
Gran
Gran
Turismo
Turismo
was
is
their,
60.
equivalent of
Forza was
Forza.
always
Oh, okay.
been
Xbox
Xbox.
PC.
Microsoft.
Yeah, I'm not much of a racing game player.
Yeah, I was a
Resistance.
Forza kid.
What's the Resistance? Demon Souls, the Soul series. No, not the Soul series. Demon Souls in particular. Demon
Hmm.
Souls was the PlayStation version. Xbox didn't get Demon Souls.
Gotcha, makes sense.
You
know what?
Metal Gear Solid.
And also
Uh,
and
yeah,
and
they were
also
always a Sony
Sony
thing.
catered also to the niche audiences with the whole JRPGs.
Yeah,
Final
JRPGs.
Fantasy.
They were one of the
Uh,
few companies that was like throwing out Final Fantasy, Persona,
The PSP also had
that
Gaia,
exactly.
This Gaia, I can't pronounce that one.
the Star Ocean had a better port of
Secret
its
of Mana.
games onto the PlayStation with the 4K
You know what's
releases.
weird? The console, every console generation seems to have this one system that is just really powerful that gets the worst games. It's really strange. Like every single console generation, it was like back in the day. It was
Nah, dude, the Neo Geo had the best games. Had Metal Slug.
What are you talking about? It's all about the Virtual Boy. You burn out your retinas, but you got that game.
well, it's like we got the N64, right? We got the N64,
Sega Genesis. Oh wait,
the
wait.
PlayStation, and the Dreamcast.
Mhm.
And
Oh, the
Dream-
Dreamcast was dope though.
It was
It
light years
was.
ahead of everything else.
It
It
had
had a
some-
56K
Yeah.
modem.
It had some of the best fighting games
It had
of
DLC.
all time. It had DLC, online
Online.
connectivity. There was for a hot minute a server dedicated to a game that had came out of the Dreamcast that was an online a specific game. It was an
It's just like-
MMO.
It's
and they kept it alive for an extra 10 years after the Dreamcast was officially declared dead.
it's
Yeah.
like it just makes me sad because it's like the Dreamcast died because they didn't have any copyright protection on the damn thing, and people realize that you can literally just burn a Dreamcast
What?
disc onto a random
What?
disc.
What do you what do you
another
mean?
common
We-
issue
we-
is
we don't know
like
about
the
that.
DVD like the DVD reader, I believe for
Speaking
for
We
the
do have a
Dreamcast was
Dreamcast.
notorious for breaking.
Catch us on
Uh,
Friday when we play.
It doesn't. It's honestly pretty stable as a system. It was hard. It was one of the systems like the PS3. It was really hard to develop for because of the fact that it was so far ahead of everything else.
That
So-
most everybody was still stuck on like, oh, previously we were working on this. This is what
Now
we have.
Is so much ahead of it. It's like the PS3 was notorious for being like just really hard to code for and optimize.
Well, it's like, and then you know which console had the opposite problem?
Which
The Wii U.
Well,
yeah,
It was too
real
dumb.
quick, if I'm totally solely.
Oh, it's
agree with-
Manny.
let me pause.
Oh, pause. Just give us. Oh, just keep recording. I'll
Oh.
cut this out.
Okay,
Yeah.
I had actually a subject I want to change.
Thank you.
Because I like where we're going with this.
Wow,
Yeah, right.
we're being intellectuals, guys.
We're being degenerates. What do you mean?
Best game is Numbers Muncher by Mavis Bacon.
Fucking Mavis
Yeah,
Bacon.
like, the reason why I was an Xbox kid. Alright, Manny finally made it home.
Yeah, you commie
the,
scum.
the biggest brains. Also, we don't have a mic for you. I'm sorry.
All right, guys. Let me just let me throw a little bit of information. All right. These civilized people.
Oh God, no, stop.
Manny, you
Okay,
have
I'll
beautiful
stop.
eyes.
You're doing the Heath Ledger impression, but you're giving him with the Joaquinist speech.
Anyway, yeah, we're just recording. We're halfway through. We're almost halfway through.
Hmm.
Are you gonna go up there, or are you gonna do one at that point? All right, no.
And just one thing. Can you plug in your headset
Yeah,
when you're
I was gonna
playing?
say.
Because
Because we
You're
can-
gonna
it-
say it's for you plug your headset.
Oh no, don't worry. I don't think. I mean, if I do.
if you do, just until like we finish this.
Yeah, because we have
Thank you, man.
literally like maybe 30 more minutes of.
Sorry, I'll give us a countdown when we start again.
Oh no, I'm looking at the little recording thing right now, so it's like.
Oh yeah, just for
No,
Smith's edits.
just for me to like cut
Yeah.
in when we say
so
start.
Right.
I'll
Wait.
pretty what's up?
Oop, 3.
No,
Two.
real quick. I was gonna say before we start recording again, just want to give us a preview. So I had the esports conversation. Do we want to do that or save that for next time?
Say that for that. Right,
Okay,
right now
cool.
we're on game development and we're gonna segue neatly into the game remake
What,
conversation.
yeah, 'cause
I was
we have
gonna
not
talk.
talked
I
about
was. I think I was changing it to like consoles for a minute. Since we talked about the developers, we talked about the games they made.
Mhm.
We want to talk about consoles and themselves for a minute.
Well, we're already on there. So
yeah,
why
that's.
not?
I'm gonna
Sure.
segue a little bit more.
Let's
and
segue into
then we
that
can
and then.
segue into the newer generations and then remakes.
All right, sounds good to me.
Okay.
All right. 3, 2, 1. All right, we're back, guys.
All right, we're back.
So-
So where were we on this conversation? We were talking about the Dreamcast and how ahead of its time, and then the Wii U.
And
Yeah.
then we had the opposite problem you said because it really did. It was really strange. It was around the same strength as something like the
Well,
Xbox 360. I feel
Because it was a halfway console.
It was their bridge between the Wii and the Switch.
It was somebody told me this once, and I don't know how much of this is true. I would have to look into it, but like according to Nintendo's specific profit margin, they were in a comfortable place where they can make such a risky machine.
Well, it was just sort of ill-fated from the beginning.
Well, that's
because
that's what I'm saying. Like such a risky machine, so that they could develop something better.
I just don't know
Mm.
why they called it the Wii U. I feel like if they named it something different, it
Like,
would have gotten more
just
sales.
say
That-
Wii
that-
2.
Yeah, the Wii 2 would have been better.
Yeah, well, even
But-
then, it's like most people thought it was an add-on for the Wii. It was just a. It was
Honestly,
just a
that's what it
It's
should have
basically
been.
what it was,
It was
kind of.
basically
But
what it
the thing is,
was,
because they were doing the
slightly
jump
better.
to the Blu-ray discs, right?
I don't think they were at the
No,
time.
no,
I think
no.
they were just
Ah,
regular
not
discs.
The
really.
Wii U, it was Blu-ray discs.
Was
yeah,
it?
we
Yeah.
use our Blu-ray disc.
Oh.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
But to me, it's just like it didn't make sense because you're bringing games that could have fit on a regular CD.
Yeah. As well as the fact that really the only reason to have a Wii U was for Smash.
Nah, man, I got that Wind Waker. I can take selfies.
But
with
to be fair,
Ganon.
unlike the PlayStation 4, it did have backwards compatibility. So
So, fun
did.
fact
It did.
about the PlayStation 3 and onward about backwards compatibility. So I digging back into my history of gaming class. This could be wrong, but the original PS3s were backwards compatible.
They
yes,
were.
they were. Yes.
They
Yes,
were.
they were.
The reason they cut that was initial sales for the PS3 weren't basically cutting the cost. Like the cost of it was too expensive, so they had to choose between backwards compatibility and Blu-ray players. And
then they
a lot
chose
of the
Blu-ray
media
players.
industry, including pornography, was switching to Blu-ray.
Honestly, I
Mhm.
think that was their best decision because it was the cheapest Bluray player of like that era.
And that's why
multifunctional play Blu-ray
Yes,
Yeah,
players.
because
a
it
lot
played
of people
video
used it
games.
for that.
And it could play video games, and it was also a very decent Blu-ray
I
player.
played
I mean,
an
yeah,
ass
like,
ton of
'cause, like,
DVDs
I
on
mean,
my- on my
'cause
PS4.
if I remember correctly, a lot of my cousins, because just to throw a little bit of background, like Mark said, he was more of an Xbox boy. I was actually I was still stuck in the PS2 when
Yeah,
when
that's
the,
why I
when,
transitioned. I
yeah.
finally got internet.
Mm.
and then when I transitioned forward, I didn't jump to an Xbox 360 or PS4. I jumped onto the Wii because it was one of the cheaper of the three consoles, and it had some of the more family-oriented games,
Yeah.
which I would have to play with my sisters.
Of
Yeah.
course, of course. It makes sense because the similar stuff happened to me. so.
Exactly. But when it came to like all the rest of my cousins, they all had a PS3, and for one reason and one reason only. If you've ever been to a Hispanic household, we love our movie collections,
Yeah.
and if we can keep up with the times, i.e., Blu-ray at the time, we will swap out literally every Disney princess movie that we had originally in VHS and DVD into a Blu-ray disc eventually.
And we weren't Hispanic. My family did the same.
Exactly.
I can definitely guarantee you that is true though, because we had like all sorts of VHSs of like movies that I didn't even know were on VHS.
And so there you go. That was the one thing that separated the PlayStation and the Xbox. Really, Xbox was more centric. Like, these are games. This is game, which is why
Gaming with your
it became
friends.
the green logo, the womb became an icon for gaming specifically around that time, because it was synonymous with it. Whereas PlayStation was like, we're multifaceted. We can do
Yeah, they're more of a
many-
machine rather than just a console.
I would say another thing that separated PlayStation and Xbox 360 was region locking.
Did the PlayStation 3 have region locking?
No.
Oh, okay.
Xbox did.
360 had hardcore region locking.
Yes, I
remember
know that
that.
because I own European copies of games that I bought overseas and
Xbox
they don't work.
and Nintendo.
Oh yeah, remember like early
Oh, yeah.
days of GameStop right before the PlayStation was getting big.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who don't know, two of the four of us worked at GameStop before this.
Yeah, it was. It's really interesting to see the trends that went by.
Yeah,
I remember that I was working at the GameStop, and this family from England came in, like London, England, and they had their DS, and they saw a Kingdom Hearts game they really wanted. So they were like, I don't know if it'll work. And us there, like, I don't think it will, but let's test it out.
Yeah, because funny enough, they don't really train you in that kind of stuff. They just expect you to just clerk,
Just-
basically.
Yeah,
or
they
they don't
expect you to
expect it
just
to
do it.
happen. Or they're like, this won't happen. This part of the training's not important. But
Mhm.
what we did for them is just like, we put the game in their DS, and it would refuse to load.
Oh
Mhm.
yeah.
And then one of us would eventually look it up and be like, oh, the reason why is because the PAL. The PAL region, which is the region that they're from, is not compatible with
Which
And
is such a
PSC.
Back and
stupid
forth,
thing,
yeah.
by the way. I
Mhm.
don't understand why it was ever implemented.
And it was
Um,
there until the Switch.
It was there.
They
until
were the
Switch.
last of the big three to get rid of region locking. I remember, like I worked at GameStop until around the Switch came.
It was because
out.
of the net code specifically that the reason they region lock things.
Mhm.
Netcode?
Yeah, that was their excuse. That
Yeah.
Well,
the
I-
network code that they would use to update and allow multiplayer
And
was
DLC.
different between regions,
Yeah, that was
and then they eventually unified it for the Switch.
and that was a big selling point for the Switch for people. It's like, these games are now region free. There's no more region locking with the Switch,
Mhm.
and
Which is
that made
great.
exactly, because if you're traveling either go.
I mean, just for example, John has a French copy of
I have a French copy of Smash.
yeah.
Hell,
And it works perfectly fine. Manny gave it to me for Christmas one year. I was like, yeah, this is great.
it's like I have Dutch copies of other games, and it's like I see that kind of stuff. And a lot of it doesn't work. I have a Dutch copy of Sonic the Hedgehog 1 for the Mega Drive. I can't play it. It makes me sad.
We'll find you a Dutch Mega Drive.
Well, it just has
Audience,
to be,
be on the lookout.
It just has to be. It just has to
no,
be
specifically Dutch.
It has
It's gonna
to
say
Our
be
Dutch.
Dutch
It's
listeners,
gonna say
be on the
Dutch.
lookout.
Be on the
Yeah.
lookout.
This
for that
task we
shit.
present to you.
Yeah, talking about region lock. When I lived in the Philippines, bringing my PS2 over was weird, cause trying to shop for PS2 games. in the
Well,
Philippines
first
was
off,
a
the
trek.
power outlet was different.
I mean, we had a converter. We had a converter, so it was good.
Yeah.
Like, so going out shopping out there, just finding all these games for like super cheap, like unit conversions. It's like a new game was like $25,
You know,
and
now
it
that-
was region locked.
now
Now
that
it
you
would be
say
so
that-
sad. So like, I
Now-
wanted to play my first Final Fantasy for real by myself. Was Final Fantasy X2, and I was so disappointed.
You know
Because
that.
like the PS2 console itself cost more in the Philippines than it was in the US.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So
It's the same for, I believe, Poland, where the games cost more because they're counted as entertainment. It's really dumb. But now that you say that, it kind of makes sense that they would region lock because
it's also super easy to bootleg in certain regions.
yeah, that's the thing. It's like, we got a region lock for certain areas because sometimes they make the games $25 and everyone's just gonna just outsource it to there.
Yeah,
Which I guess
it's
is
like mathematically, what you just have to spend $10 for shipping.
if that, or you just have someone you know over there if you do, and then just buy it for you and send it to you.
Yep.
It's cheap as hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like that's I guess that's an argument for region locking, but I still don't like it. From a developer side or from a producer side, I can see why they would do something like that.
Besides that, I wanted. So like.
Yeah,
what about
region lock
current
is no
gen
more
consoles?
with the new console specifically,
God.
which
Current gen consoles.
fantastic.
A lot of new and better things.
I can
New
go
consoles.
overseas and play my Switch with my friends, and they could let me borrow their games, and I can let
Well,
them
here's
borrow
here's a
theirs.
question. Just to tie back into the whole consoles not being backwards. Some consoles being backwards compatible. Some of them just flat out not being. Worst person for this was Nintendo, by the way, because games switching between different types of media discs.
Yes.
Whereas I think PlayStation should have had an easier time doing it, but you know that's another conversation for another day.
But we gotta ensure
I have a question for you guys though.
Yeah.
Would you rather have the ability to play those games
Mhm.
through an emulator in the system, i.e. backwards compatibility,
Mm-hmm.
or have a developer remaster it?
That's
Honestly, it depends. If it there's always in my head there's two types of remasters. Well, moreover, there's a remaster and a remake. A remaster, I feel, is something like the Crash Bandicoot Insane trilogy.
Yeah, which is just
Yeah.
like
It's
a
just sort of
carbon
a
copy, basically.
It's
Well,
it's a reskin.
It's a reskin. I
With-
believe they changed very few.
There's very few things actually.
Very,
There
very
are
few.
very minute changes. Some of them actually change the way the game is played, such
Mhm.
as the fact that
The coyote time is less as
th-
well.
that they fixed a few glitches
Mhm.
that made the game
And
like on
exploits.
yeah, not so much exploits, but more yes, they did fix a few exploits, but they also fixed things like there were certain timers that just didn't work, where you can get platinums in certain stages
Mhm.
because they were set to the times of other stages.
Yeah.
yeah.
There were some things that didn't. I think
Uh,
in the Vanna Crash Bandicoot, there's some things that like didn't work well in its favor. Like some putting in a new engine.
It's because they were using Unity I can't remember
Unreal.
exactly
They
what,
use
but
Unreal, I believe.
but the thing is, the original hitboxes for Crash were squares. In the remake, they are the generic pill shape that Unity has and Unreal has. So there are certain instances, not a lot of instances, but there are certain instances where you can slide off of things because you're at the very edge of it, and because of the fact that your hitbox is pill shaped, you'll just slide. For those of you who don't know, it's just sort of the generic hitbox
A
for like
boundary box.
yeah, boundary box for
collision
yeah,
box.
collision detection box for most things is it switches between a square shape and like I said, a pill shape. Most games nowadays use a pill shape for some reason. Honestly, I
more
prefer
circular. It's supposed to be
Or
more
circular.
accurate.
And
It's
organic.
more true and
Organic,
more fair to the player. Quotations on fair.
yeah.
Yeah, so it took out a lot of cool stuff you could do, like pixel walking.
Yeah, it messes with stuff, but it becomes it's very 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 simulate. It might as well be the same game aside from some more high level strats. If you're just playing the game normally, you're gonna feel like it's almost identical. But then you, well, sorry, go ahead.
I'll say another game is like Skyrim. Literally, the Skyrim remaster, all they did was added different lighting,
Yeah.
more
A lot of it is-
textures.
yeah,
They
it's all
updated the
texture
textures,
They
yeah.
updated textures, which looked good. Like they added atmospheric stuff. Like the game looks nice,
Yeah,
but
it's the same game.
I still get instances where a dragon spawns in the middle of my town for no reason.
And then
A
flies
dead-
into
oh,
the
a
sky.
dead dragon.
Yeah, a dead dragon,
There's a
and then
dead
you just
dragon
get
in
a
the middle of the town. I was like, oh, okay.
You know, it'd be funny. If for that specific Skyrim, they updated not the newest patch of Skyrim where they fixed a lot of the issues, but the original patch of Skyrim, which is the same broken ass game.
Well-
The funny part is, it is the same broken ass
It is
game.
very-
It just looks prettier.
It just looks prettier.
I
Well-
still have to avoid certain quests because it'll corrupt my game file.
Well, then you have like okay, so you got remasters.
Then there,
like-
what your texture upscaling.
But it looks good while doing.
This is true.
Yeah.
So
So
sauce.
you got your remasters like the Insane Trilogy, and then you got Resident Evil 2
Yeah,
and
Resident Evil 2.
Final Fantasy 7 Remake. I'd say those type of games, they are not even the same game whatsoever. Resident Evil 2 looks like what you'd imagine Resident Evil 2 used to look like, but they are very much completely
And so
different games.
and there you go. That's my question. Would you rather just have the older game and then have a completely new game that, like that what do they call it? Most of the developers use the true vision of what I wanted to do back
Honestly,
then.
honestly,
Snyder Cut.
I mean, a
The
lot of
Snyder
games-
Cut. It's the Snyder Cut of
honestly,
games.
I do prefer the. What I would prefer is if they did make just a straight up remake, because I would rather them make a new experience, which is closer to what they originally imagined, rather than just re-release the same thing.
Just
Yeah, like
prettier.
7.
Yeah,
I think it also depends
Like
on when the
FF7.
game came out
it depends on
and
when
the
the game.
technical limitations at that time.
That and if they've re-released the game at all in any capacity, because there are
Yeah.
certain games that you have to use an emulator to play nowadays without spending like $200.
Because a game that came to mind for me personally was Okami.
Yes.
Now, Okami came out in like the early mid 2000s.
Uh-huh.
So it is games from that area have been remastered.
The
Yeah.
the
But
only
of course,
I would say how they built the game, it plays like the vision, it seems. So for them to remake that game with better graphics, I think it'd be better off to make it a sequel. So
Yes.
I would say in
Mhm.
most cases, with the games they are choosing to remake, which are these older games like Resident Evil,
it's
Crash
mostly the
Bandicoot.
it's most of the ones that had
Odyssey.
severe technical limitations.
Yeah, I say go
Yeah.
for it.
If there was one thing I would change, by the way, this is just kind of like a personal thing on Okami.
Yeah.
If there was one thing I could change, it's that god awful motion blur.
I mean,
Fun
that's
fact.
just to mask the game. frame rate
Exactly.
dropping.
No, and then just to nix it and make it look prettier.
Fun fact:
I mean, we
That
have
was
the
the
console
first-
generation
that
and
was
optimization nowadays to do
Mhm.
it.
first game to give me motion sickness. I have it on the PS3. I do. That is a game I want to play for the channel eventually.
Well, don't you have it on the PS4 too?
Sorry, PS4. I meant. I have it on PS4. I really want to play for the channel.
Yeah, of
One of my
course.
favorite games.
Yeah, favorite
Yeah,
game. Oh, dude, that's a series though. Everybody's favorite games.
Well, a good,
Yeah.
a good,
Like I would like a Sunshine remaster.
Everyone wants to send
I mean,
And
because
that-
like,
and
the
here-
bullshit remaster we got.
And here lies the problem with Nintendo. They
Ain't
don't look
doing that.
back, only forward.
What is all?
It's like-
Remember we get our Pokemon remix? Why can't I have my Diamond and Pearl?
Because that's not necessarily Nintendo telling them what to do. That's the Pokemon Company choosing to do that.
Game
That's
Freak,
true.
yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, we did
And
get,
Pokemon.
No, not Game
Pokemon.
Freak. Pokemon Company, because they're a completely different company.
Right, right.
we did get a really pretty version of Wind Waker, and then a slightly less bloom-filled version of Twilight Princess on the Wii U.
Slightly less blue.
Because honestly, I can't tell the difference between those two games. Really, the
It just has better frame rates.
yeah, pretty much. Because the game looks almost identical. I think.
Which
that-
honestly, hey, I think it looks good. It just confused the hell out of me because I played it on the Wii, so
Oh,
everything's
dude, yes.
everything's flipped.
that I played it on the Wii first as
So
well.
I'm like, I'm supposed to
um,
run this way, right, John? And then everything's locked. I'm like, where am I?
If,
Right.
if it makes you feel better, Master Quest mode in that game makes it flip again.
Oh, dude, I'm gonna play like that then. If that's the
Uh,
case.
Boom.
Easy.
But a good
Fixed.
there's games that I would like to see, not so much remastered, but there's games that I would actively just want them to completely recapture the feeling of the games that they had before, because there are games like you. What are you gonna completely remake Resident Evil 4?
Yes.
Just start from
Dude,
scratch.
I'm gonna make it play like Devil May Cry 5. Leon's gonna be able to do that spin kick whenever he wants,
He
mow
does it
down enemies.
whenever he shoots, just hops. from
but
side
here's
to
the things.
side.
Dr. Sanchez is gonna come in and do two-wheel chainsaws
Oh,
and
no.
do flips at me.
What? Oh.
And then we get games like
Answering-
the Master Chief Collection.
Hmm.
Oh well, yeah. Then you got something like Halo 2, or what is it? Just,
ODST.
I don't
Ox.
remember.
Well, there's Halo 2, Halo 3. ODST is just like a different campaign.
Well, it's like Halo
the
2 has an actual complete like remaster where it looks completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Or
I
was it
think-
one?
No, it's 2.
It's 2?
Because remember 2 had like
That's
the
right. You
crazy-
can switch between the two, right?
and it has the
Mhm.
crazy good looking cutscenes.
Mm,
Yeah. You get games like that. And then, with not even developers involved, bring it back to Elder Scrolls, you get like, I
I
don't
would
know how
love
long-
to play Oblivion.
I don't. You've seen whenever a new Elder Scrolls comes out, they take the previous game and they put into the new engine. They're still working on putting the entirety of Oblivion into the Skyrim engine, and now Elder Scrolls 6 is around the corner, which is interesting when those fan-made games, because the big thing about that community is it kind of dies once the new game comes out.
Yeah.
But the thing is that because they're not just putting like the assets, they're remaking the quest line, the complete quest line,
Uh-huh.
and putting it into the current gen engine.
Because they
Which
can't
is-
just you can't just slap things onto something and then hope it works.
No, you can't.
Especially with how developers work. Sure, you can say that they use Unreal and stuff like that, but it changes. It changes over time.
Right, and that's why it takes them so long to make games like that,
Yeah.
than to make it work, so it feels natural.
Well, it's the same thing. Why Nintendo didn't? It wasn't Nintendo's specific main company that remade a lot of the franchises on 3DS and,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and the DS. It was actually other companies that took the time to recreate everything in those games as faithfully
Mhm.
as possible. Change a couple
Well, you
things.
see, that's the argument in favor of remasters, because you have something like Star Fox 64 where the game hasn't been available to really anyone lately for
Mhm.
a long time.
Because there literally hasn't been a game between.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's not like you can
So
say
it's-
something like, "Oh well, I mean, I don't need to play Super Mario 64 because Odyssey is in theory the same game, just
better.
newer.
It's the new.
It's the new Mario 64."
And
people
so sucked
still-
it up, and this is what we have now.
The thing
Well,
is,
no, but like you're still getting that same experience,
Yeah,
in
just
one way
through-
or another.
Through a different
It-
lens.
but with stuff like Star Fox 64, when's the last time you actually had a Star Fox game that
wasn't
was about piloting, that wasn't adventure?
that wasn't Star Fox Zero? Yes.
Mhm.
uh,
What?
I would just say,
I would
leave-
like a complete remake. It just depends how it's done. It's basically what we're talking about.
And like John said, it depends on which game as
Yeah,
well.
it very much
Yeah.
does. Because, like, say the
Because
adventure
like
series,
Call of Duty Modern Warfare 4 was stupid. I played it. It ruined it for me.
But I think there's one thing we all can agree upon, regardless of the game. Leave it to the professionals. How many
Yeah.
bad fan
Oh,
quote
don't-
unquote
don't get me started.
remasters have we
Yeah.
seen?
Okay,
Ah,
so
yes.
there's
We
a
could
thing
deep dive
online,
on this,
guys, where people throw some really good classics, Majora's Mask, Pokemon,
assets.
Tomb
assets.
Raider.
They're just throwing them into the Unreal /
Whatever current gen-
Unity engine, whatever they can get their hands on.
Whatever
whatever has a
free
good lighting
engine.
engine.
Whatever engine that
What-
has a built-in system that they don't know how to use, but
Fully.
they could look quote unquote good.
And by quote unquote good, they just put in light effects that they don't know how to fully use. They're blowing out all the colors, washing out everything and all the detail, and saying, look, they could have done this. And the general populace who
Eats
don't
it
really,
up.
they completely eat it up. I remember when Sun and Moon first came out, people were complaining. It's like, why can't these games look better, more realistic? So someone literally threw
Somebody threw Incineroar.
and Salazzle
yeah,
into a
it's-
field and just put
Indi-
the directional lighting in it, bumped
and
up
then
everything. and it looked
individual
terrible.
grass, I believe.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, first off, let's talk about what's wrong with that scene. One, that's an engine made for PC. Two, no.
Oh, dude.
All right,
We're here now.
Yeah, we're here now. What-
We stopped at this station. We're speaking to the mic so they can hear you.
I hate when people try to remake a game in an Unreal Engine or something, but they try to make the game look realistic, even though the game's supposed to be cartoonish.
Yes.
just
That's
looks
yes.
100%
We're
talk
getting
about
to that
Pokemon.
actually.
Yeah, it looks disgustingly ugly.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I
we're
thought
actually
that.
we're getting to that. So like let's again let's see what's wrong with throwing two Pokemon into an Unreal Engine with supposedly real blades of grass. One, the 3DS is not going to be running all that.
No, it isn't.
But we're in the
neither
year
there is the
20XX.
Switch.
Two-
Technology
Yes,
should be
neither
there.
is the
Two-
Switch.
The game is supposed to be cell shaded. It's supposed to have a specific cartoony field.
But then you'll-
To be in line with the series.
But
Yes.
to be, and I hate to be that person, the argument that they bring up is like, well, we can do it. Why can't we? Look at Breath of the Wild. Look at what other stupid games they were comparing it to. It's like, oh, we have games like Uncharted. Well, look at that. It's so realistic and blah blah blah.
I was like,
It's like, well, they're using a different rendering tool for that. The big thing
That
about
is-
Uncharted is they use Substance Designer and Substance Painter. Pokemon's not using that.
No, it's not.
Nor
It's
sh-
also using
yeah.
a vastly inferior hardware in terms of power.
What do you mean? You're
'Cause-
saying my PS4 can't be compared to my Nintendo 3DS XL Pokemon Edition?
Yeah. Well, even the Switch has less power than the damn thing.
It's-
I'm gonna be 100% honest with
Jeez.
everybody who thinks that that Nintendo can just plop their game into their current console and be like, we're gonna make it look realistic. Look at me
No.
in the eye and tell me how good The Witcher looks on the Switch.
Over this podcast, look us in the
Hell,
eye.
Look
Do
look
it.
look
at-
over this podcast, over this screen, in my pixelated face. Look into the pixels
Well,
that make
here,
up my pixelated
We're
face.
right there.
I got
And tell
another-
me-
another example.
And tell me
Look
how
at-
good does
I got
The
an
Witcher
example for
3
y'all.
look on the Switch?
Audio listeners, just listen.
Yeah.
fucking
I got one real quick.
Mortal Kombat 11.
Or Monster Hunter on the Switch.
Any of these
Doom.
games, they look
Doom, yeah.
they barely
Scrim.
function. They barely function and they
Look.
barely keep up with the
Let's be real
supposed
here. Let's be real
accurate
here.
frame rate of these games.
NBA and WWE were the worst games on the Switch. They could not keep up with. The Switch couldn't keep up
And-
with NBA.
And that's why the Switch has to result to more stylistic games, which honestly is a point in its favor because I kind of do get
There
tired
is
of
more
the.
artistic freedom
Yes,
with limitations.
Also, it's because
Mhm.
the companies are told this is what you can do, and so the company has to get creative,
Yes,
and
that's
oh,
always been
or
Nintendo's
maybe
forte.
that's what they wanted,
Yeah.
or maybe that's what they wanted, and the game's gonna look like this, it's gonna run like this, and we're gonna make it be as not proficient as
Optimized.
optimized in this specific console.
Because, like we said earlier, they're games first rather than experiences.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, exactly. And if you're looking for something like that, that's the whole point of like a PS4.
yeah,
Yeah.
It's like for PS4, it's like if you want to play, because the Uncharted games aren't as gamey as most other games.
It's
Well,
they're
it's
they're
a- it's
rail
a cin-
shooters, but
they're
they're
more they're more
It's a
they're more
cinematic
like
adventure. game.
cinematic
yeah,
like
it's
experience.
really on rails, very
But
linear, but it's a good experience.
Yeah, exactly. It's
yeah,
not bad.
it's
It's
not
not
it's not
bad.
a game. But are you having fun?
Mhm.
Is it
Exactly.
good? Does it look good? Does it feel
Yeah.
exciting to go through a game like that?
And I
Yes.
think that
Yeah,
and
it's just like a movie.
the cycle back a little bit. I think that's Sony's philosophy. Are you enjoying yourself? Are you
Yeah.
enjoying the
And-
story that's being presented to
And
you?
that's why I
have a
think as a
different-
company they're the ones that accept the most in player feedback.
Remember when like
They
the
have
big
the
thing
best. They have the best. Not the best. They have a certain type of immersion that they go for.
the storytelling.
Yeah.
They're very big on storytelling, and overall cinematic.
Hell,
Remember-
hell, let's go all the way back to the PlayStation 1. Final Fantasy 7.
Spyro the Dragon.
One of the biggest
MGS.
one of the biggest philosophies for Final Fantasy 7 is that it's like this. We're going to completely go away from the traditional stagnant
Yep.
storytelling of a Final Fantasy pixel-based game
Yep.
Mhm.
and completely revamp it with new 3D visual design, like full animated sequences. Like, sure, right now, like if we were to plop it onto the PlayStation 4 and play through it, it looks blocky. We could criticize it and be like, "Oh,
Oh,
look at
yes.
that!
Like,
Oh,
you can't-
pre-rendered backgrounds. Who uses
Yeah,
those
bro.
anymore?"
See, the thing is,
But-
I honestly would still say that pre-rendered backgrounds could be useful in these days because,
Because
goddamn.
Pokemon uses it.
Well,
Pokemon uses
You look us in the face. Next time you watch our Pokemon Sword and Shield playthrough episode,
No,
insert
no, I'm
number here is up. You look at that crowd, that gym, and tell us it's not. That's individual.
Well, no, I'm
models.
talking more like how Resident Evil 1 remake does.
Yeah.
Have you ever
Yeah,
have you
yeah.
ever played that where it's like really fucking pretty, but the games back then they couldn't handle that. That's like CGI.
No, and that's what I'm saying. It's just like, but in that philosophy, the PlayStation continued from even then to still use cinematics and story and good storytelling.
Yes.
Yeah, like
Throughout
look
all their
at
games.
Quantic Dream.
Mhm.
They made a career with Beyond Two Souls. I
Mhm.
loved Heavy Rain. I don't care about all the memes of how broken most of their games are. It's just like I like
Eidos.
story.
Eidos is another good
And then
one.
Naughty Dog had the best of both worlds. It had some of the better platformers of the generation,
Yep.
but when it came to the PlayStation 3, it made a huge splash with their cinematic games. Like
Yeah,
it was
that was
keeping up with stuff like Call of Duty, which at those points were the biggest
game.
sellers, the games that everybody was buying.
And emulating.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And here's the
Yeah.
reason why those games are really popular too, and why the whole frame rate debate is really big with those. It's because they were originally designed for PC,
Makes sense.
and so multiplayer games where people go like, oh, why does this game look bad on PS4? Oh, Overwatch shouldn't be on the Switch because frame rate this, frame rate that. Is like, well, I mean, technically they were made for PC.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the
so if you
demands of some
if you-
people
if
may
you really-
Well, it's
have
like,
how
it's
important.
like you
Yeah,
can't-
if you really want to experience the game the way it was supposed to play, then buy a fucking
Well, it's
computer.
one of those- it's-
I
it's
can't
go- it's
afford
going back to the
$3,000.
producer thing.
Well,
It's
that's
going-
not our problem.
It's going back to the
It's a
producer
PC
thing
game.
where the producer is like, hey, I want this game to be on other things, and they're like, but it's not supposed to be on there.
Yeah,
Hey,
we have
hey,
to. We
hey,
have to
money.
get.
Yeah,
Well, no, and
money.
yeah, and then it'll be like, hey, we we need a whole team to work on that specific. No, you guys got to do it.
Well, it's
Mhm.
like Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric, right?
Oh,
That
God,
game
don't.
was designed for PC.
The
That
game was designed. The game was designed for PC and for actual consoles.
Yes. And then Nintendo was like, "Nah, fam, that's
We own you.
that's our
Our
console
3DS.
exclusive."
You
And they
don't.
were like,
you don't touch Sonic. We touch
"Post
Sonic.
What the fuck?
And then they were like, okay, I guess we gotta get Unreal 4 to work on the fucking Wii U. The Wii U.
Where like Unreal even has.
Oh, also,
like,
also, we were done with the game. Now we have to recreate everything in the next 3 months.
Exactly. Pretty much.
Sonic Boom is like a beautiful train wreck.
I mean,
The
it's,
more you look at it, the worse certain things get. And like you can appreciate, it's a strong word, but some of the good, but you really see like, wow, they really got this down. They really didn't get this down.
well, yeah, there's a lot of things where it's just like, oh man.
And here's the thing, like when we're talking about like how bad some games look, most of the time it really isn't the development team's fault.
It's almost always the producer's fault.
As in the guys that are actually putting their blood, sweat, and tears into these games, the guys that are spending nights,
'Cause no one
hell,
wants to
sometimes
make a
even
shitty game.
unpaid
No.
weekends.
Yeah.
At the end of the
To
day,
make these
it's
games.
it's their name marked as I'm the level designer, I'm the I'm the graphic designer, I'm the modeler, I'm the animator. It's like they look at, oh, this producer did it, but it's not going to say, yeah, Mike Johnson is the guy who designed who green lighted and insisted on the underwater parts of the Aquaman game. It's not going to say that in the credits. It's going to say battle designer Mike Judge, which I think these are actual names I'm pulling from somewhere. in my
Somewhere in
memory
that, yeah,
place.
Well, it's
somebody-
like I think one of the
Is that the guy who
credits.
did King of the Hill, Mike
one of-
Judge.
one of the credits in Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric is the final credit in the thing is special thanks to sleep deprivation.
but
That's
to
true.
tie it all in, just don't like people shouldn't be doing lazy Unreal remakes.
Oh, yeah, that's what we were talking about.
yeah.
Oh,
So
God.
you guys that you do your thing in YouTube. If you're gonna do it right.
Well,
because
the thing
because
is-
here's my thing. If I were to slap a couple Pokemon models, give them their basic animation, plop them in a field, I'm gonna do one or two things. I'm either gonna be lazy and just plop a nice light source and be like, oh, look at that specular map on
And
those
it's usually
cheeks.
just one light source. Just-
A singular.
Or-
laser.
Or I'm gonna capture a really good version of the original vision of the game. So like, let's say it's the 3DS model of Incineroar. So they were going for more of a cell shaded slide or light fade shaded
Yep.
look to it. So we're gonna have 3 bounce lights off of these cheeks to make sure that I'm getting that nice reflective specular in there and see how far I can push it into this render engine. You guys don't understand what I'm talking about here. If by the way, that's in terms of rendering, it's all the light sources that make the scene look like it's real, not just that it's a flashlight on a miniature and you're hoping that you're getting it right.
and that's what,
And,
and that's what the
and
people-
all you really did for work was make a high res model of a Pokemon.
They don't even make the hybrid model; they just rip
Well,
the model
a
at the
good
lighting.
a good example of one of these things that always sort of
put
annoyed
one
me
light
that
in
people
it.
go nuts for. It's not to disparage the person working on it because obviously they're trying.
Also, fuck motion blur.
I'm not a
please
fan of
stop
motion
hiding-
blur.
Stop hiding
Your
frame rate
mistakes.
drops.
But the thing, the Ocarina of Time Unreal thing, right?
Oh yeah.
It looking at it instills, it's fine. It's just
Like it's a quick glance. Yeah, it looks good. Then you deep.
then you
you
see
look
it
into
move.
it's like-
Then you see what he does to the level design. I think that's my biggest issue, where he's trying to recreate the actual feel and control of Ocarina, which he seems to be doing relatively okay. It's just you kind of have to know the inner workings of how a game works. He also just straight up took the animations from Ocarina itself and then added frames to it. The reason that that's bad is because it's really floaty and doesn't look like it's animated. Obviously, I don't think he's an animator.
Well,
Or-
also like it's also the difference between understanding how a game works, understanding how a game is built, and also understanding what makes a game look good.
Yeah.
Another thing is,
Sure,
like,
he
direction.
understands that the game works this way,
Well,
so he's
that-
gonna
that-
he's gonna make it work that way. But what made the game what it causes the game developers to make it this way? That's another step that he has to learn
Yeah,
in order to make a functioning game like that doesn't feel floaty, like you were saying.
Yeah, and then the other thing.
And the last step is how do we make it look good?
See, that's the thing. So what
You
he
skipped
did.
the part.
He
the
skipped the part
important
and just
go
threw
right
it to the
the
end.
ending,
He
yeah.
went to step 3.
There's an issue that I have with it. The biggest issue is that he starts changing level design around, and why that's an issue for me is the level design in any game that is worth its salt, is very deliberate. Level design is a very deliberate thing. You have to always be ready to.
It's a fundamental thing to learn.
Yes, it is, and that's the thing. He doesn't really. It's obvious to me that he has no idea what level design is
Yeah, it's like it's open world, but there's always going to be an A to B.
Nah, son. You know what game has the best level design?
What?
Street Fighter.
Yeah.
It's a box.
Well, it's like okay, so
Not a dome, a
Lost
box.
Lost Woods in Ocarina of Time is a bunch of corridors that lead into small rooms, and they each have landmarks, all that jazz. They have you can at least tell where you are within the Lost Woods, even though they're supposed to be the Lost Woods. You know where you're at.
Yeah, and then they add an extra little spicy element that kind of tells you how to solve
For the first
the
time,
puzzle
yeah.
of the Lost Woods,
And
which is like the music.
the music cues, which is great, and then that leads you around, and then after the music cue's gone, you can keep searching. There's other things to do, and it's a way to get shortcuts in the area, and you at least have an idea of where you are. So the Lost Woods in this remake that this guy's doing, he got rid of the corridors and he made it this big open area that is covered in trees. But the thing is, there are no landmarks, and it's kind of dark. It's really big and empty. That's one of my biggest problems with open worlds back in the day as a whole, because they used to just be like, hey, look how much space there is in this game.
So
There's not much in between.
So let's continue on to that. This guy tried to make the Lost Woods function like the original Lost Woods, but try to make it look like the new Breath of the Wild Lost Woods.
Yeah, but
That's
They're
what he
trying
tried
to
to
add
do.
that Tony Hawk's American Wasteland no load times.
well, it was like that, but it's like even in Breath of the Wild, there's always landmarks. You
Well,
always know where you are.
here's the thing: with Breath of the Wild, the way they fixed the issue of having you plopped into a
Big-ass
open
world.
biggest world and open area where
In
a
a
place
big
called
sandbox, yeah.
the Lost Woods that's supposed to have some kind of key like that.
Yeah.
Aside from the landmarks and the fact that you can use your torch to figure out where to go next, it specifically stops your momentum to tell you that you're lost by literally losing you and you having to plop back into the beginning of the
Oh yeah,
game.
it's also
Mm.
very linear.
Yeah,
that's
It
the
hides
thing.
itself.
and
In
it does it does it does like Seuss was just saying, level effects. Like the fog will get thicker, the canvas stops panning you as well.
Yeah, it's
and
like
stuff like that.
it's
There's
like,
a lot of clues.
there's a
So
lot
like,
of
well,
cues.
my thing that I
A lot
would
of
love to see
game
in
design.
that would
Yeah.
be that like you keep walking and like the fog gets super thick, but you're still walking, and then eventually it unthickens and you're back at the beginning of the level.
instead of it
Instead of it just literally-
teleporting. you.
Yeah, that would have been cool, but it would be a weird transition because then you look back and then you see road.
It would be confusing, wouldn't it?
Because then somebody would just turn the camera around and see what actually is happening.
Where the cut to black with the weird Korok screech is a very good effect. Like it's very it's very horror movie esque if you think about it. It's
Like,
like,
even
But what you call
like
it?
the whole point of like what open world design is, okay, there's main points. There's no one real way, but you could do it 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 3.
Yeah,
3,
there's still
2, 1, and there is an endpoint. This one's number 4. You could just go straight to number 4, but that's not advised if you want to experience the game.
Yeah, and even then, like it's like I get that you want to have this big foresty area, but the thing is, if you're going to do that, it needs to be designed. It can't just be tree here, big flat area, tree here. It needs to be, what is this for? What does it give to the game? What does it do other than waste my time?
Okay,
Well,
well, here's and then I know we've talked about Breath of the Wild a lot in this one, but let's look at Breath of the Wild in terms of design philosophy for that one. It starts you off in a place called the Great Plateau, and it doesn't start you off at necessarily the bottom or necessarily at the top. It deliberately puts you midway through the full
Yeah,
escalation of that plateau because it wants you to see something. And
Yeah.
something being this old dude going, hey.
and you can literally go in any direction at that point.
Yeah, at that point you
You
don't
tell me-
have
you
to
can,
talk
like,
to
I
him,
don't
but you see
stranger
him.
danger him.
Yeah, you can stranger danger him, but then it also gives you other context clues. There's a fire over there.
There's a
some
weapon.
red dots moving around. There's also the shiny thing over there.
Yeah.
Technically, you can do anything because you can see the castle right off the bat. And if you've ever played a Legend of Zelda game, theoretically, that's where you need to go.
Well, not even Legend of
Like I was
Zelda.
just
It's
talking
just
about,
good
that's,
level design. It's context clues.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
but
it-
the
it-
pure basis is
And that's what I'm saying. Like
main
everything is
spots
placed.
and ending. You can just go
Deliberately.
straight to ending.
yeah, everything is placed deliberately to tell you something.
and it's
Yeah.
it's also put there for a reason. Oh,
Because if I remember back to some of the interviews for that game, they said that the biggest challenge was leaving landmarks for
Oh, yeah.
people to look for them. And that's the way they fixed it was like the marker system.
Yeah.
So you see something, you mark it, and then you're traveling, but then you'll see something else. But because you
Yeah.
marked that previous location, you can still always go back to it.
yeah, I like here's a good example of I guess what we're trying to say when it comes to deliberate level design. In the very beginning, you have a right past the old dude. You got a sword and a stone across a lake that's on like this long like spiral mountain looking thing. So to get there, there's like an obvious jump here spot.
Mhm.
If you jump there, you actually accidentally end up getting a Korok seed just for free.
Oh yeah.
And then you're in the water. So not only now you know, okay, I can swim, I can get these Korok seed things. And it's kind of sticky, and I don't really like it.
What? The game's teaching you how to play
And
what?
then you can climb. then it tells you, okay, I can climb up this thing and grab this random ass weapon. And then you get a rusty sword, and then
It's great.
rusty swords break really fast, but they're strong. And it's like, okay, that's teaching you a lot of things at once. And then right across the way, there's a big ass boulder that's got cracks all in it. And if you've ever played a Zelda game, you know I got bombed that shit. I got bombed that shit. So it's like,
But
like,
how do I do it?
it's like all of this in this one area. It's a very small area, and honestly, I prefer open world games when they're more confined and small rather than large and empty, because you can put more things in a smaller, compact space like that.
And there you go. That's the big difference between somebody who doesn't know what they're doing and just placing things randomly thinking, oh, I just need to fill up space,
Yeah,
and somebody who's been doing it for 30 years realizing, no, this needs to have some sort of reason.
things
There has to be-
exist.
Yeah.
There has to be a limitation that it's not obvious, but you could tell it's there.
Everything
You can tell it's important.
Everything in a level should either be there to either A, progress the story along, or B, provide some world building. You shouldn't be putting things in or adding stuff just to
add
fill
stuff, yeah.
space. Because it just makes your scene look cluttered or just it doesn't flow. Like,
it makes
where am I
it-
supposed
let's
to
take-
go?
let's-
What am I
let-
supposed to
Artificial
do?
is a good way.
Artificial, yes.
And on the more realistic
Manufactured.
spectrum, someone who can argue like perhaps this game is more random than you think. But in reality, it has a lot of purpose. The Witcher 3.
Yeah,
You go into the game, and you automatically explore it, and they don't plop you up randomly in the middle of the woods, expecting you to figure it out. No, they plop you right next to a road,
Yeah,
and they tell you, "Hey, we need to get somewhere."
You don't have to.
You don't have
they,
to.
They imply that they're already going somewhere. on that
Exactly.
road.
Skyrim does the same
and,
exact
and,
thing.
and every
Yes.
town has something to do, side quests to do, but the town isn't just randomly plopped there so you can get some XP. It's for world building.
Mhm.
You get to know how war torn most of these towns are.
Yeah.
How you get to get clues of where you could go next. Hell, some
Yep.
side quests that lead into bigger things. One of my favorites is being the Baron side quest, leads you into one of the biggest mainline quests in the game, which is fighting the witches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spoilers ahead for Mark.
Oh, The
I'm
Witcher.
sorry.
The Witcher fights
I
witches.
mean-
Who could have fucking guessed?
Big brain. That's
Big
too.
brain.
That's too humongous. For
You
me.
know, it's another example of that is Skyrim. In the main city, like the
No,
first
Skyrim's
big
just completely
city-
random. What you talking about?
I
mean,
like,
Skyrim
a lot
do-
of these
I'm sorry. Go
open
ahead.
world games. Like what? I really like the Rockstar formula of teaching it.
What is that?
Well, it's very open. It's just like, well, it's the way the game is taught, like introducing characters, like.
No, I got you.
Yeah. but-
Anyway, you were saying, John, about Skyrim?
Oh, it was just there's a mission
sec.
in the main city that it's a side mission. You get at like a certain level,
Right.
but if you do it, it literally transports you to a place in the game. You can literally beat the entire game without even going to this city. But
Yeah.
this one side quest introduces you to this place in the game.
Yeah.
And that's another cool thing. It's like, oh wow, like
I think Skyrim does have an issue where all of the stuff that isn't like, because there is a lot of areas that is just, this is an open area with nothing really in it. It does have that a lot of places, but
or
it also
just a very specific quest line that you have to do that you may never do takes you here, and it's like, what's this weird unique set piece? It's like, oh, you can't really access that unless you're doing this one
Oh,
weird
yeah.
guild mission.
Well,
It's
the
like,
thing
what?
is, I feel like Skyrim is like half and half because it was during that time when they had to make games way bigger than they needed to be. If that makes sense, I feel like
Yeah.
if they shrunk Skyrim,
Oh, you know which game had a really terrible time with that?
what?
Assassin's Creed 3.
What do you mean?
I can see that. Yeah.
I don't see anything. I love exploring through the 13 colonies of colonial America.
continue. But continue. No. You mean right off into the distance, so you hit a point where you have to fast travel to one of the 13 colonies.
And see, that's one of the issues with a lot of things where they force you to need the fast travel because there's nothing on the way there. Like I hardly ever want to fast travel in Breath of the Wild because I'm just like, there's a lot of stuff to do on the way.
Well,
I'm gonna go there.
You know, this is a good one.
What?
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man,
they
yes,
make travel-
Spider-Man has a lot of good stuff.
They
in it.
make traveling fun, and they give you stuff to do that you can choose to do or ignore on the way.
They cheated
and-
though because New York already has really nice landmarks. It's got
And
good
Right.
levels of sight.
Well, landmarks
New York,
aside-
New York has good level design. Good
Landmarks-
job, New York architects.
Landmarks aside, New York aside, it's like they made the web swinging fun.
They
Well,
give
yeah,
you
they made
random
they,
encounters
oh,
core
along the
mechanics
way.
good.
they made the core mechanics of the game fun.
Or Batman.
What?
Can you
Yeah.
fast travel in Batman? I forget.
Yes.
I think so. Yes.
You
I
can.
haven't played in many.
Do you
Like
want
the-
to?
the
No.
Because-
like what,
because running
classic
around
or
is fun.
modern classic Bethesda. That's open.
Well, it's like with
I kinda-
when it comes to Skyrim, it's like there's a lot of stuff to do, and all the stuff is like really fun.
Mark,
I have a lot to say
Mark,
about.
I'm gonna
that
tell
kind
you
of
this
thing.
right now. In Skyrim, would I rather go through the mountain again or just get there?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying. It's like
that's
it's
what
like
I was
it's-
trying to talk about, but I'm
Yeah.
a little tired. But yeah, like with Fallout and Oblivion, yeah, I already gone there. I'm not fucking walking all the way again.
yeah, because it's so far away. That's the
Yeah.
biggest issue. It's so
Like-
large
like
where it
Fallout,
could just be
like-
more confined and closer together.
It's like
Then, you get
then
over
there's the
in
terrible
Cumbered,
example.
and then it's a whole thing.
It's like
And then you're
I
out,
picked
and
up
then
too
you're
many wheats.
and then, yeah, no,
Running out
or
of
the
cheese.
opposite problem. I'm out of cheese wheels, and then there's this werewolf here.
Well, it's like in Breath of the Wild. If I'm like, hey, I should go this way, I'm just gonna fucking walk. There's so much stuff on the way there
Yeah.
that I can go through, and there's
Only if I'm like
You-
super tired and I want to finish this mission and go to bed,
and you
then
s-
I'll fast travel.
or you're trying
Or
to get away from dying.
that too.
yeah.
Like, oh, this Lionel is here. I have one heart left. Bye.
Later, fam.
I think what we
Uh,
can take away from today is many developers, many ways to make games.
Many philosophies, many ways of making games, and
people who make
ultimate.
fan games are assholes.
there is
It wouldn't
no
be a
right
podcast
way.
without a strong.
Well,
opinion.
actually,
Thank you,
actually,
Anthony.
no,
Hot
hot,
topic.
hot,
Hot
take.
take.
Best fan made game, Kanye Quest.
Ah.
And we're gonna cut it there, guys. See you guys next week.
Oh man. Aw.